is up there inside the Staples Center. This is a video phone image that we are sending to you, just showing people sitting, waiting. And again, there are many people gathered outside as well, and all around the United States. They're the First AME Church in Los Angeles, both throughout the United States and around the world.
It's incredible when I look at these young children. You think Michael Jackson was about that age. I mean, he was 11 years old when he was first on television, and even much younger than that when he first became renowned, leading the family literally as the lead singer of the Jackson 5. And you see small children like that and older folks here in Harlem, New York, watching the Jumbotron at Times Square. I mean, and you think about that, starting your career at 5, what pressure, what incredible success, and what brilliance, really, to the work that he did as an entertainer.
And so we were talking about this earlier. My son was with me as I was preparing for the interview, and I played some of the old stuff in the car as we're driving down the road. He didn't know Michael Jackson from anyone. He was like, "Daddy, who's that? I like that song. Play it again. I like that." And he started listening to it. And when we got home, he sat down on the computer, fired up YouTube, and started looking for every Michael Jackson video he could find to learn the dancing and the moves. And, you know, he didn't know any of the controversy. He just knew the music.
It's so interesting when you listen to people who are musicians talk about the way the songs were put together, the history of the songs, and the care that went into. I mean, in your interview, you even talk about literally the breaking down of some of the most famous songs we know.
Yeah, Billie Jean, for instance, he talked about he actually laid down 4 different basses in that, doing the bass line. He talked about the bass line being the protagonist to the song, the guitar adding character. He was a student of music. He studied Tchaikovsky, he studied Mozart, and really went to school about the music, the art, and what it took to build a song.
Also, in terms of his dancing, I mean, he was a student of dance. You look at some of his moves, and you see Grace Kelly. You look at some of his moves, you see a Fred Astaire. There's a huge spectrum. Exactly.
In fact, Fred Astaire called him after the Motown 25 performance and said, "Michael, I watched it last night. I taped it. I watched it again this morning, and Michael, you really knocked them on their behinds, as we should say."
Except he didn't use the word behinds.
Yes. And he was very much a big fan. And even if you look at Michael's physical shape, when I saw him and I hugged him, he very much had that dancer's body.
Was he physically prepared to do this massive tour? I mean, obviously the pressure for the financial interest, the pressure for just getting it right. I mean, having a gigantic fan base that was expecting you to once again knock the ball out of the ballpark, do it better than you did it the last time.
Well, people have to remember, he was 50 years old, but he brought on Lou Ferrigno to help train him and get him physically ready.
Although I must say, I interviewed Lou Ferrigno, and they only actually met once, I think, in May. So I'm not, a lot of people have quoted Lou Ferrigno as being an expert on Michael Jackson's physical health. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I will say that I talked to Kenny Ortega, who's the director of the event that you were about to witness. And just as a reminder, we are watching the scene inside the Staples Center. 20,000 people have gathered to celebrate the life and to say goodbye to Michael Jackson. We're waiting them bringing in Michael Jackson. We believe his casket will be placed at the front of the stage as the performers sing above him. A whole spectrum of performers, also a number of people we anticipate will be speaking as well. But I talked to Kenny Ortega, who is the director of this celebration.
He did all the High School Musicals.
He did, and he was a co-director and co-creator of the O2 shows that Michael Jackson was going to do. And I asked him what sort of shape was Michael Jackson in, you know, as a performer, and he said building, that he was building. You know, he's 50 years old. He wouldn't go as far to say he was, you know, at the top of his form. I think that would be a hyperbole. But he did say that his voice was opening up, he was getting better and better, and that he was certainly ready and optimistic about the shows. And he says that one of the last things Michael Jackson said to him is, you know, asked him, are you excited? And he said, I'm excited. And he then, Kenny Ortega asked Jackson if he was excited, and he said he was excited, and they hugged goodbye, and that was the last that they saw of each other.
The pressure had to be incredible, though. I mean, you know, when you see, especially today, Michael Jackson sort of created the tone of these shows that are, these performances that are incredible, that are over the top with pyrotechnics and great dancing, and some people even said that he was thinking about creating a new move. You know, again, another way to top yourself from what you've done before. So one has to imagine that the pressure going into something like this would have to be just tremendous.
And Michael was a perfectionist. That's the other part that people don't realize. It wasn't like he just showed up and danced and sang. He knew every single component of the show that they were producing. The dance moves, the lighting cues, what songs would come on, what camera shots there would be. He was telling me during the Motown 25, he had a similar involvement to every minute detail, and that kind of pressure, along with that kind of perfectionism, is tough burden to shoulder.
People have described him as actually being involved in the costumes, you know, every single micromanaging. You would think that once you get to the level of Michael Jackson, you can kind of assign the costumes to somebody else, but actually he was so involved in every minute detail of this concert. Again, because the stakes were so high. Is that fair to say? The stakes were incredibly high?
Stakes were enormous. They were enormous financially. You know, a lot of the money that was going to be raised out of these shows were going to go towards his other debts and other ventures. They're enormous emotionally because of the connection he had to his fans, and he really wanted to put on a show for his fans, and he also wanted to put on a show for his kids, who really hadn't seen him perform the way that many of us had seen.
Right. I mean, that really does raise the stakes, doesn't it? For the first time to be performing for your children who are 11 and 12, and I think the youngest 7 years old. You know, really, what pressure all around.
And he was going to bring his family to England. They had already had a house rented by AEG Live, the company which was promoting the shows. And he was going to get 1 day off in between each show. That was something which he had worked out with them as part of the agreement to get him to actually do 50 performances.
He really struggled the last time he did a show. I mean, it was... they've now talked to some of the medical professionals who've been with him about how difficult it was for him to do those shows are absolutely grueling.
It's a lot of energy, and you know, just being on stage and dancing. Some people are saying that, you know, at 50 he was out dancing some of the 25-year-olders.
You're looking inside the Staples Center in Los Angeles, where we are waiting for the memorial service to get underway. A few minutes ago, about 10 minutes ago, Smokey Robinson came out, and the first thing he did was to read a short note from Diana Ross, really apologizing for missing what is surely to be just such a sad event for her, who has such a personal connection and personal relationship with not just Michael Jackson, but the entire Jackson family, and a relationship that spans, you know, 40-some years, really. We also heard from Nelson Mandela, and when you look at it that way, clearly an indication of a guy, you know, first Diana Ross, someone he met as a child, next Nelson Mandela, someone who he was so connected to with his humanitarian work. I mean, talk about a global impact right there in that first 5 minutes of Smokey Robinson speaking.
And again, the power of the music globally. Quincy Jones would tell me, you know, Quincy is not here today. He's in Europe, but he would tell me about going to places like Dar es Salaam and going in a club in Tanzania and hearing them put on "Want to Be Starting Something," and everybody would come out.
I remember being in Hanoi, Vietnam in 1991. There was a U.S. embargo on still. I was going to school there, and being someplace where a performer was singing a Michael Jackson song, and I went up to them afterward because they sang it so well. The person did not speak a word of English, but they had memorized it so well that they could perform that song and make it sound as if they spoke English.
Why globally did he have such an impact? I mean, there are many performers who are so famous in the United States, who are very talented, very good, but somehow don't